In this lecture, we're going to continue our discussion of unit conversions and this idea of dimensional analysis by looking at units within the metric system. One of the nice things about the metric system is that it only has a single conversion factor, right? Just one, and that covers all of the different units we're going to talk about. So before I jump in and start talking about these conversion factors, the conversion factor and how it's used, I want to take just a minute to think back to some of our earlier conversations about how decimal numbers work and what the effect of multiplying by 10 is. Right. So if I take a number like 1.235 and I multiply this by 10, it becomes 12.35. And if I take this, and if I do this again, I'm going to put a couple examples here. 1235 times 100, that's 10 squared. I get 123.5. I'll do one more. 1.235 times 1,000, that's 10 to the third, and this becomes 1235. All right, what I really want you to focus on, this is going to make a lot of these conversions in the metric system go a whole lot faster, is what happened to the decimal place. Because you notice in each of these examples, the digits 1, 2, 3, and 5 didn't change. The only thing that changed was where the decimal point ended up. So when I multiplied by 10, right, you think 10 to the first, the decimal point moved one place to the right. The number got one decimal place bigger, if you will. When I multiplied by 100, that's 10 to the second power, the decimal point moved two places. Finally, when I multiplied by 10 to the third, it moved three places. So this exponent, including that kind of implicit 1 up there, this exponent is really just telling me how far to move the decimal place. In this case, to the right. Now let's take a look at another situation here. Let's say, and I'm going to start with a bigger number, 436.2. Right, so let's say I multiply this by 1/10. In other words, I divide by 10. Right, well, this is going to be 43.62. Right, and if I were to take this and multiply by 1 over 100, and divide by 100, which is 10 squared, this becomes 4.362. Finally, I'll throw one more in here. I'm going to multiply this by 1 over 1,000. That's 10 to the third. And this becomes 0.4362. So we really have the same behavior here, right? The same behavior here. Dividing by a power of 10 moves the decimal point to the left a number of places equal to the power of 10 in the denominator, right? So it's all about moving that decimal point around. Okay, so hold on to that idea, and let's switch and talk about the metric. So let's take a look at how we can leverage this idea of moving the decimal point around to do some really easy conversions in the metric system. Now, metric units are all based on this prefix here, right? So I'm going to do this specifically in terms of meters. Meters are the metric unit for linear measurements, kind of they're equivalent to feet, right? So the unit for the symbol for a meter is an M, right? So if meter is the base unit, then decimeters, centimeters, and millimeters are also metric system linear measurements. And if we go up the other way, we have decameters, hectometers, and kilometers. And this last column here tells you the difference between each of these. A decameter is 10 times a meter. A hectometer is 100 times a meter. And a kilometer is 1,000 times a meter. So you can see, hopefully you're starting to see in your head here, if I give you a unit in meters, and I want you to convert it to hectometers, for example, you're going to be moving the decimal point two places. And to go into the smaller units, deci, centi, and milli, do the exact same thing, only now we're going to do 1/10, 1/100th, and 1/1000th. So when I'm doing these conversions, right, the first thing I do, I do it in my head. When you're first starting out, you write this out on paper. That's fine. I write out all of these units because once I know these in order, it's really easy to tell what it is I'm going to do for a given conversion. So let's take a look at an example. Let's say I want to convert 2.4 kilometers into meters. Right, and I've got my prefixes written out up here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to kilometers and I'm going to count how many steps it takes me to get to meters. You see, it took me 3, right? So that tells me that I'm going to have to change 2.4 kilometers by a factor of 1,000 to get to meters. The big question in all of these metric conversions is going to be which direction do I move the decimal point? Right? And the way I remember it, if you've got your units written out like this, you move the decimal point in the same direction. So I went from left to right. In my counting here, I'm going to go the same way when I start moving my decimal point. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 places. It's going to end up here. And then backfill with as many zeros as you needed. Right? So 2.4 kilometers is equivalent to 2,400 meters. And it's good to do a reality check with these, right? Remember, a kilometer is big. Kilometer is kind of on the same scale as a mile. And meters are fairly small. A meter is just about 3 feet. So you're going to be able to fit a lot of meters into 1 kilometer. So yeah, I would expect the number to get pretty significantly bigger. And yeah, that's what happened. So let's look at another one. I want to know how many hectometers there are in 105 centimeters. Same procedure. I'm going to start at centimeters and I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4 units to get all the way over to hectometers. Same procedure. I'm going to take 105 and I'm going to move the decimal point 4 units in that direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I have to backfill, right? Fill in an extra 0 there, add my decimal point, and there's my answer, right? 105 centimeters is 0.0105 hectometers. So let's try one more, right? You can pause the slide, pause the presentation of the video if you like here. See if you can work that out for yourself, right? Start the slides back up and you can see how I do it. All right, so we're going to start with decameters, and we're aiming for centimeters. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 spaces. All right, so I'm going to take my number, 1.2, and make it 3 decimal places bigger. 1, 2, 3. That means adding 2 zeros. So 1.2 decameters is equal to 1,200 centimeters. So that really is it. That's all you need to know to convert back and forth between any 2 metric units. And we're doing it just with linear measurements here, but you'll see as we get further into the chapter here, the same process works for volume measurements. Those are liters. Same process works for mass measurements. Those are going to be grams. It's going to be the exact same process of moving the decimal point around. Okay, so in the next lecture, we're going to wrap up our discussion of methods for working, for doing specific conversions by looking at how to convert between these U.S. Customary and imperial units and metric units.